Twitless, what are we talking about today?
We are talking about Absolute Batman issue number 5, which is leading continuing the Zoo storyline. This is by Scott Snyder and art by Nick Dragana. And so Batman, this is in the Absolute universe. So this is a universe that has been tainted and corrupted by dark side. So everything's going to be edgier. Um, and Darkseid's influence is, like I said, just kind of permeating like all of reality, essentially. Uh, in this universe, short recap for people who maybe are not as familiar with what happened in the past couple of issues, but this version of Batman is his mother is still alive. His father was a victim of essentially a mass shooting event at a zoo, and Gotham is it's familiar, but it's also a little bit different. And in this case, our version of Batman is much more blue collar. He's not super rich. He doesn't have. He has some gadgets, but it's all just because he's sort of just working out of a garage, essentially. His Batmobile is a killdozer because he kind of like works construction, essentially. And in the past issue, the Party Animals, which is this evil gang led by Black Mask, they kind of gave Batman an offer that he couldn't refuse, and they said, "Hey, we're part of a corrupt system, okay? And you can fight crime, but you can't fight the man. You can't fight City Hall. You can't fight the overarching military-industrial capitalist complex. So let's basically make you controlled opposition in a way, or you won't be able to take us down, but we'll set you up nicely. We're gonna pay you money. You take our money, you can become a real Batman, essentially become like the mainstream one, become rich." So they offer him like over a couple $100 million, and Alfred, who is not his butler but kind of a John Wick agent kind of character, advises Batman to take the money. And Batman said that he would take the money in the previous issue, but in this issue, Batman does not take the money. He springs his own little trap to try and catch Black Mask and put an end to the Party Animals, but not all goes according to plan, is the main gist of what goes on in this issue.
Yeah, it's funny that it's telling that you had to reference previous storylines to synopsize this one because almost nothing happens here of note. And I thought it was a little bit too early to be having a filler issue already in the absolute run. This is only issue 5, and I kind of still wanted more meat on the bone, especially since that hasn't even wrapped up the first story arc. So we're still trying to get introduced to this Batman. For the majority of the issue, it's pretty much all smash 'em, beat 'em up territory. There's a few character development moments, but they are forgettable and not very significant to the story overall. There's interaction with Gordon and Bruce's mom that seems to go nowhere. And then there's a reference to the bat signal, which is basically accomplished by this Batman burning a big pile of money in the shape of his bridge symbol, as we learned in the previous issue, and having it project a a representation of that symbol onto the sky that resembles slightly a bat signal. So I don't know. I really, I really don't think that this series is landing the way that it needs to, and this punctuated that point for me where it felt like Snyder realized that he was probably losing the audience, and he wanted to give them a little bit of fan service because the story and character development here just isn't hitting where it needs to be. And so we needed to get more of, let's see Batman in action. He's beating up thugs. He's showing off the effects of his costume. The spikes protrude out and impale one of the criminals that lands on his back, and then we get reference to the bat signal. And
You didn't appreciate the reference to the Dark Knight with Heath Ledger, with "It's not about the
Yeah,
money, it's about sending a message," and they burn the money.
no,
yeah,
I
that was
mean,
wild. But this time it's Batman
This time it's
himself.
Batman burning the money. Like
Right.
that's very like very much a reference to that. It's just
The
flipping
the
it a
attempt
bit.
is happening. I appreciate the even if the direction of the attempt is strange, it may be misleading. Maybe sometimes it seems to be crossing into like almost like heresy with the canon, you know. But like, I appreciate the risks that at least are being taken. It doesn't feel like it's never felt like it's been phoned in, you know. And I think some of the ultimate, or sorry, the absolute storylines, it's more arguable that it's phoned in. This at least feels like it's action packed. I appreciate that we're actually given a action driven storyline for once, you know? Like, we're not just kinda, like, sitting around brooding, which is what so much of modern comics seems to be resigned to, you know? And once again, this feels like it's a story it's being drawn by someone who loves to draw, you know? Like, they'd be phoning it in if with all these action scenes, they weren't giving as much to the action as they are. So I
Speaking of
Action
appreciate
the
that too.
schlock.
speaking of the oh, that's too me. Speaking of the action,
Same it.
I actually appreciate this. I'll tell you why. In fights, superhero fights, it's often the case where and especially when you're handling a character like Batman, um it's delicate because you don't want to just have Batman clown on everybody. And there was a recent fight I think he had with Black Canary and the Black Canary Lady Shiva fight thing that I didn't particularly like. I don't think Tom King handles Batman very well in some of those fights. But you want Batman to be powerful and you want him to be a winner, but you also can't have him win every fight. Otherwise, there's no tension. I really like how they handled Batman losing a fight in this issue. He didn't just get baned essentially. It wasn't just like you get clowned on because this guy's just better than you. We established in the previous issues that Roman Sionis, the Black Mask, is a capable fighter in his own right. Our Batman's built like a tank though, and the way they get him is they kind of like dogpile him, and Batman gets the crap beat out of him, but he also looks capable at the same time while that's happening, and the villain is
Yeah.
able to look like he's capable while also kind of doing some dirty things as well. So in terms of like fight choreography, Batman was able to get a loss handed to him without it feeling too cheapened or feel like no, that wasn't Batman, you did him dirty, he would have won that fight. They spring a trap on him, they tie him up with a bunch of nets, and then they basically, like I said, they
Mhm.
dogpile him, and that's the only way they're able to kind of really get the edge on him. But through that, they're able to then really just hand him a very solid beating, and so as I actually felt like the fight had some meat to it, and
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, how you handle fighting in a superhero comic, because these comics are meant to be about battles and about fights. They're basically shonen for American audiences. And how you handle combat is a very important aspect of this. And it's one that has been very badly overlooked in for years. Many authors will just put the fight in as just like an obligatory thing. They'll just have fights be over in 2 to 3 punches or couple kicks, and it's just time for the hero to win. And I actually felt like Dragata and Snyder knew how to pace a fight a little decently enough so that I was getting invested in it and not feeling cheated out of it. So specifically with the fight, I enjoyed that.
Let's take a brief pause to hear from the awesome creators joining us today and find out what cool projects they're currently working on.
Hey guys, if you love sword and sandal historical fiction with a healthy dose of ancient Roman and Egyptian fantasy mixed in, then check out Kyrie. We've got 450 pages printed so far, a 4th book on the way. Order your books today at curiecomic.com.
Modern day, classic superhero storytelling. Get The Adventures of Omega Girl, issues 1 through 5, now on Indie Planet.
Thank you to our awesome creators, and now back to the video.
I mean, is it supposed to drag on throughout the entire issue, though?
Yes, yes, yes. Where have you been? Superhero comics have done this for.
You've
Oh,
lost
gosh.
touch, well read.
Where's the
Forgotten.
exposition? Where's the setup? And just he's just beating up random thugs on the street. Like if if it was a knuckle, drag out brawl with some antagonist that's been, brewing through several issues, and
But
you
it
really
is.
wanted
It's
to
the guy.
see.
It's the guy. One of the guys who dogpiles him is the guy whose hand he chopped off in the first issue. He's like, "I'm coming after you." Like, one of the guys who dogpiles him is literally
I'm
the guy.
supposed to
He's
I'm
missing
supposed
his
to
arm.
remember the significance of that to
Yes,
justify
because
this
Batman cut that
issue-long
guy's arm
fight
off with his
scene.
bat symbol. Like that's memorable.
The Black Mask character is interesting, but again, like the references to the Dark Knight were burning the money, but then with this one, he just wants to create chaos in the city, and he was calling out Batman to confront him, and Batman, he said, didn't show, and so now he's offering money for people to go out and uh, you know cause mayhem and be criminals as well. So for me, that's Joker from the '89 Batman movie. He was calling out Batman, and Batman didn't show, and so he was going to cause harm to the city. And then he's also Joker from The Dark Knight, where he just wants to see everything burned. So it's it's unoriginal, to say the least. I like the setup where he describes his past life of being a pig farmer, and how he slaughtered the pigs, and he gives this really interesting little story of the nail getting stuck inside the pig, and they enter this rabid euphoric state, and he wants to exist in that moment. So that to me was the single highlight I thought of this issue. Everything else seemed inconsequential, and not very well set up. Alfred ditching Batman for reasons really felt like it was just an incidental moment, and I didn't really understand any of the motivation there. It didn't seem to
Well,
draw on any
the
previous story
the
threads.
the reason there is that Alfred. I think the thing that I'm not seeing is what does Alfred see in Batman to begin with. I'm
Right.
a little unclear as to that. But assuming that there is something that he sees, maybe that will be revealed a little later on. Uh, he has a more jaded view of the world. This is a more jaded Alfred, a more jaded universe. And so Alfred wanted Batman to take the money so that because he thinks that, hey, we're all not big enough to take on the powers that be. But if you take this money, you can make some real change in the world. And one day, my people will be able to take down at least this Black Mask guy because I'm connected to some of the powers that be. And if you work with us in our broader global system, essentially, we can make some change, right? And that's where this book gets intellectually interesting for me because what we see here, and there's a part of this I deeply dislike, but there's something intellectually interesting about it. This book is a commentary about different types of change and people who want to make change in the world. You have Batman who has a type of bitter idealism. He's definitely edgy. He's willing to like cut people to pieces for it, but not kill them. To use guns but not use killing bullets, which is kind of silly.
Mhm.
But he has this idealism about justice, right? Batman represents that aspect, and
Yes.
on the opposing side, you have Black Mask, who is a nihilistic, enjoy the chaos because the powers that be are all beyond our control. And then Alfred is somewhere in between there, who's like a sort of moral gray, who's like, well, the powers that be do exist largely outside of our control, but if you work within the system, you can change it in little ways that make a difference, and that's the only thing we can do. So Batman's more of the don't compromise, even in the face of Armageddon. He's a little more like Rorschach, essentially, from Watchmen, if you think about it that way. And like I said, Black Mask is just completely into nihilistic destruction, chaos territory, and Alfred is a sort of moral gray in between. And so Snyder is outlining these different approaches. What I find to be interesting is that all of this is grounded against a view of the world that is, I would say, almost incompatible with superheroes in some ways. Just by acknowledging how corrupted the world is. And I'm wondering where Scott is going to land on that, right? Is Batman going to actually be able to stand up as an aspirational force for justice and really be what we see superheroes to be? Or is this world so much like the real one Because in the real world, like superheroes can't just like change the world on their own, right? That's why we use escapist fantasy to escape to a superhero universe where that type of change is possible. So Scott Snyder is clearly playing with these types of, the reason why people show up for superhero fiction, right? To escape from the real world that can't be changed in such clean, neat ways. And there's parts of me that resonate with some of it, and there's parts of me that are turned off by some of what he's doing, and I'm still
That's pretty
unsure of.
damning criticism, I think. It's pretty
Is it
Yeah,
okay?
well,
yeah,
because he's
yeah,
not a moral shining beacon of hope. This Batman.
yeah,
He's
But that makes him more relatable to our moment in a way. It drags Batman, the superhero, to our level. And on one hand, like I said, I hate that. On the other hand, it's almost like it's what happens when the American consensus can no longer look at our institutions with any faith in them. If you look at the fact that no one trusts the media, no one trusts the government, no one even trusts the medical community in a lot of ways, we live in a time where everyone has sort of woken up to a reality where we trust nothing. Superheroes don't exist very well in that type of reality, and this absolute Batman is essentially the superhero who exists in a world like ours. And on the one hand, that's intellectually fascinating. On the other hand, it turns my stomach. So, like I said, I feel very intellectually, it's interesting. This is a Batman who exists in a world where mass shootings occur, right?
yeah,
Superheroes tend to not exist in that type of world for a reason, you
yeah.
know? So it's Batman who exists in a world where, like I said, where Columbine is like a daily occurrence. And,
Columbine.
you know,
Yeah,
Columbine, sorry. Um,
yeah. I don't know. It's the idea of a Batman that fights that has no real belief system other than to portray periodic images of the working class and the underrepresented for self-servicing, um, vir- um, virtue points. It just it doesn't really address any of those topics. Like you're talking about how there's nothing really to fight for, and it's such a dark and jaded reality that he's even being encouraged to take the compromised path because it's the path of least resistance. But um, and yet he still dresses up, and yet he still fights, and yet
he's not taking the compromise path though. So there's, like I said, there's this little glimmer of hope, but it's against a backdrop that's completely devoid of it,
what
which is interesting.
what are his supposed motivations though for anything that he does is the
mhm,
problem with this Batman. He's just a dumb kid in terms of all of his human portrayals, other than when he's trying to be this intense, action figure. And that's what I didn't like about this issue is that it's too much on the action side any um, without any preceding kind of development to show that there's a good reason why he is this figure. There's a good reason why he'd care about beating up these thugs and taking these risks and burning the money, and other than, oh, it's a reference to the Dark Knight. Well, why would he do that? What about this Batman would motivate him to burn cash? Is he like some anti-capitalist against the idea of currency and exchange? He wants a system of barter. Like, what is it about that one act that's significant for this character? There's nothing. He's just a kid that sits at home and gets scolded by his mom, hangs out at the gym, and has a bunch of intellectual friends that enable him somehow to have cool, attire, equipment, and vehicles, which none of it is really explained very well how that's all in place.
could it be? I don't know if this is a really lame response, but could it be that the failures of this story arc are actually really useful and helpful and interesting because they might be actually helping to help us as readers reappreciate what the the, the canon version of Batman is actually doing, and that you really can't you if you can you can do a really intricate good faith job at inverting a lot of these archetypal uh, the pillars of Batman lore and play with that, and you can discover narratively that you just really don't have. It's not just that you don't have the same character, you don't have a character worth being excited about if you rearrange those puzzle pieces. I
It's
I
so
think that's
bad.
interesting in itself. It's so bad, it's it's good, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, it's so bad, it's good because it reminds us of what we're not getting.
Yeah, that's
So
really sad that I just said that.
yeah,
I don't know if I'd call it bad, but I do see what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's
the
a
art saves this book, honestly. If it wasn't for the art, I don't know if I could go through this
it's got some
exercise.
nice art.
Art's
The art
really fun. Yeah.
the art is fun. It's definitely the type of art you'd want to see for an alternate take on these characters. Like if you're going to do an alternate universe take that's going to have be different, using different art is also a signal, right? It's like, hey, you're in for a different thing. And I think that's a fair way of signaling expect the unexpected in what we're doing. Some of the other absolute series, almost called it ultimate again, myself, but the some of the other absolute comics are using more of the typical register. I think Sandoval, I think, on Superman, and he does regular Superman, and so there's a way your brain takes you may not notice it, but your brain did. Your brain, if you're using the same artist for the mainstream version as the alternate experimental take, your brain's going to try to make connections between them. And at least
Yeah.
in Absolute Batman, Dragata's artwork being such a different, almost a different register in some ways, helps register the fact that uh, you're meant to. We are doing something very different, and there's something that's okay with that. I I, I think I'm really interested in seeing where he lands the plane. I really where Snyder ends maybe this arc even on what Batman represents is going to be very important to how I ultimately look back, not just on future issues, but back on these issues as well. So there's one, and this is kind of the same thing with the other absolute characters as well, especially Superman. It's like, where are you going to land on this? Because that's going to really inform how I essentially reinterpret everything I've read so far, which is
Yeah.
kind of weird, but that's kind
It's
of
the
where
la
I'm at.
Is any landing that you get gonna ultimately be satisfying when this is the path that you had to take to actually get there? Like, it could be the greatest conclusion of all time, but you had to read through all of these issues to finally get
I
there.
like some of these issues. Like again, I love simple, straightforward superhero action scenes. So like, yeah, like I said, the fact I could talk for almost like 5 minutes on just the fight scene that Batman got into is evidence of my feeling on that.
I don't know, just the explanation that his symbol is now a bridge just screams so much, you know, "Please, validate me in this storytelling." It
Yeah.
took away everything thematic and important and,
Right,
uh
the bridge was silly. I'll admit that.
yeah, significant about the character, and it's like, "No,
Yeah.
virtue points,"
I'm a
Yeah.
bridge
A
builder.
lot of effort made there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm. Well, in light of that, let's talk about, final thoughts. Well read, what are your final thoughts on Absolute Batman number 5?
I could have just read the last 2 pages of this issue and, have been done with it, and, I'm still waiting for this to actually go somewhere, to be quite honest.
Hmm.
I like a lot of the aesthetics, but a lot of this book has just been for the visceral experience, not for any substance whatsoever. Um, and a lot of these villains are forgettable too, because they feel like clones of a lot of things that we've seen before. So I'm still waiting to get something really original. I had hope, I think, after issue 3. Issue 4 left me feeling very dejected on where we might end up with this storyline. And issue 5 did nothing to redeem my dour outlook on this series.
Sad. How about you, Twitless? What are your final thoughts?
I think that in many ways, our escapist fantasies are projections of where we are in as a society, as a world, as people. Um, and I think that one of the things that has fascinated me the most about when the realization I had at the end of this issue, but also something I've been kind of that's been percolating as I read Absolute Batman in particular. But it also ties into absolute Superman and Wonder Woman, I think. This, in my view, is the Batman of our current generation in some ways. These are the superheroes that are created out of our zeitgeist and where we're at mentally in a way. Or at least a certain number of people are at.
You're not wrong. Yeah.
And I think that is in as much as we have problems with that, I think it's also a reflection of that zeitgeist. And there's a lot of suspicion, cynicism, and even violent ideation. I think all those things are a part of, where we are at as a world, and it's unfortunate, but I think this is the type of escapist fantasy that kind of comes out of that soup. So in a way, ethnographically, um, or there's something interesting about that. It's uncomfortable what that ends up saying about us, that this is what comes out of our psyches to put, but it's also informative, I think. So that's all that to say, I am still interested in seeing where this goes. Um, but it's definitely got some strong strengths and weaknesses, pros and cons to it.
Thank you very much for checking out the video. Subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more.